Now
What's
we're
up,
live.
guys? Here with Paul and Aaron, shooting the
Hello.
shit
Hey,
Sunday.
definitely shit shooting.
So you guys been paying attention to this Zimbabwe crap happening?
I know that Mugabe, there was a coup. Supposedly there's a coup.
So
And
it's really interesting because, at least from my perspective, because my dad, so my middle name is Obramnishiro, which means feared by
Obramnishiro.
Obramnishiro, which means
Obramnishiro.
yeah, it means feared by the white man.
Ah, you're
So
not that scary.
a little bit.
a little.
um, So when my dad was growing up, he was born in 1955, so there was like the strong anti-colonialist movement, right? And Zimbabwe was like a big deal, Rhodesia back
Oh
then.
boy.
Yeah, so
Awkward.
a little bit, right? And obviously, like they went one way, full Marxist, and Mandela went the other way 15 years later. But when Mugabe took over in 1980, it was like a big deal. And then obviously he just became a fucking asshole. And, like Gaddafi and all those guys, he stayed in power for 37 years. So, to me, it's just like, it was kind of funny when I saw um, the military guys take over TV and they were like, nope, not a coup. Like, not a coup.
By our official definition.
We're just keeping him under house arrest. And he and his wife, they call his wife Gucci Grace.
I did not know this. I knew she was somehow involved in this, though, right?
Yeah, so she's like probably like 50 or something like that. And he's like 93 or 94.
Wow.
30.
Yeah.
Apparently she like worked in his office. It was like Bill Clinton marries Monica Lewinsky, basically. But
I made a terrible joke yesterday.
Wait,
go
what?
ahead.
The whole. For once, I just wanted to be the one receiving oral.
Anyway, but basically she was like a young girl, right? Who like got Mugabe to fall for her. And since then, she's just like had whatever she wants. Like there was this thing where she went to London to shop and she spent £1 million.
Wow.
Oh.
What's the exchange rate on pounds to dollars?
I don't know.
I know it's up to 1 to 1. It's within order of magnitude, so yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely how currency works.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Their hyperinflation only started in 2014 when they like kicked out all the white farmers and then nobody could create food, so the government printed a bunch of money so people could buy food.
Awkward.
And then like $1 trillion couldn't buy a loaf of bread.
Sounds like Weimar, right?
Yeah, I think that happened a couple times.
Oh,
Yeah.
The barrel of.
And now everyone in Britain's racist, so
I don't know. It just
common
works
pattern.
out. Yeah.
Inflation leads to racism, apparently.
I think there's like a pretty strong correlation there.
Yeah.
No, but so she's known as Gucci Grace, and there's literally videos of her like. First of all, like apparently she like fucked this one journalist up because she was like punching the guy with her diamond ring.
Wow. It would be an honor.
Kiss it.
It's biblical level Zimbabwean butcher porn.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But there are like videos of her like screaming and talking about how like the current vice president, because the current vice president had been with Mugabe since like 1980. But he was expected to become president when Mugabe went out. And then she was trying to convince Mugabe to give her the presidency.
What, like the literal? I know she had taken over a bunch of advisory positions that had like qualified people.
No, she wanted to be president.
Yeah, I didn't know that part. So
Yeah.
is that somehow? What is that related to the coup? Is that because they were like, this isn't happening?
No, it is. So she got Mugabe to kick out his vice president. He like fled the country, and then the guy was like, "No, fuck this." So he like hooked up with his boys in the military, and they were like, and the people in the military are like, "Yo, this is not going to be the next president. I'm sorry, this girl is just not. We're not doing this."
Reminds me of something.
Well, that's the interesting part, right? So I was talking to my mom, and she was like, "Yo, the thing people in America don't realize is that they set an example for a lot of like young developing societies." And she was like, "I would have voted for Bernie Sanders, but when it came down to Hillary and Trump, I was like, if Hillary becomes president, think about the example that was set for so many like young democracies who have strong men, and the ladies are potentially thinking about coming to power." So she was just like, my mom. I don't think.
Wait, but why didn't Merkel set that precedent?
Or Thatcher.
Or Thatcher?
Yeah, the Iron Lady.
Or
with their
Victoria.
Their husbands becoming president?
Sure.
No, I just meant them. Oh, I see.
Okay, yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's not just about it's about women like using their husbands to gain notoriety and then getting power as a result of that. So she was.
It's like the dick is a leash.
Right. So then just Victoria.
Yeah. So she was really not down, and then she. But it's interesting, right? So I feel like there's this, especially in democratizing societies, people talk about women being in politics as this inherent good. But my mom didn't grow up in like, a 60s feminist America. So she's actually like, no. Women are like, when women are bad, they're terrible.
Yeah, yes, they're really bad. They are really, really bad. I wrote a blog about it.
I have no comment.
No, yeah, I have no comment either. This is my mom. If you hate her, just talk.
Oh, I have a comment. I have a comment.
You can read his comments.
Yeah, you can read the comment sections on my comments.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, people are terrible whenever they're terrible, but she was just like, and she has a friend too. I'm not gonna say her name, who's like kind of a power sycophant. Also, just like does everything she can to sort of. So every time she saw Hillary Clinton, she saw that friend of hers. And then saw that friend of hers taking over different developing societies in the world. She was just like, no, we're going to make America great again. And like my mom, a black lady would be in her office because she was working at the school for the disabled. And it's called Perkins School for the Blind in Massachusetts. She's not there anymore, but yeah. And like all these like older ladies.
I just thought of a terrible joke. I'm sorry.
They're in their like 60s and 70s who just get so hyped about Hillary becoming president just because she's a woman. And Hillary was like, yeah, the fact that I'm a woman is a strength of mine, which I can't even like begin to respond to.
Do you guys see that gender bent Trump versus Hillary debate?
Gender bent? Oh, where they like they switched it, and they were saying it would just be like Hillary would just sound terrible if she was a guy.
Yeah. So what they were trying to say was that basically they're trying to show how racist people were and
sexist.
Yeah, sorry, sexist people were.
Orange people.
Yeah, orange against Oompa Loompas. Against the noble Oompa
The biggest Oompa Loompa. He's king of the Oompa Loompa.
Best Oompa Loompa ever.
Big Oompa Loompa.
Willy Wonka and that affirmative action on the Oompa Loompa. So they gender bent it to show how sexist Trump supporters were and like how likable Hillary would be if she were male, and also just how unlikable Trump would be if he were female. But like the exact opposite happened. Like one, as a female, Trump read even better.
Wait,
and Hillary
how is that possible?
Very assertive? Was it
yeah,
like, and that was a good thing for
a
female politician?
Yeah, it was like legit as opposed to like.
Female just never said anything that made any sense whatsoever. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, but she was very assertive about it. Is the important thing. People don't actually care about sense.
But okay, you remember
that one thing where
it's not... Clinton was like, "You're a Putin puppet," and Trump was just like, "No, you're a puppet. You're a puppet. No, you're a puppet." And he said that like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. So
that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous. But apparently, so like they showed to audiences, and audiences preferred the female Trump to the male Hillary, and like the male Hillary like read as like actively unlikable, just really unlikable. You do not want a male.
Super condescending, like just
not
like
just condescending, but so it's kind of like it's this uncanny valley between between masculine and feminine, or I don't want to say necessarily dominant and submissive, more like
She seems like a robot to me.
Like-
That's shitty in both.
like assertive and pandering. So it's just Hillary hits some uncanny valley, and if she were male, that uncanny valley becomes even more apparent.
So, I just want to tell you, he wants open borders, now we can talk about Putin. I don't know Putin. He said nice things about me. If we got along well, that would be good. If Russia and the United States got along well and went after ISIS, that would be good.
Whereas Trump hits a different uncanny valley, and if he were female, it would be less weird because we don't have these weird cultural things about it. It just seems like a bossy mom.
Okay.
I just can't imagine a female coming over being like, I know more about ISIS than our generals do. I mean, I guess it would be funny coming from anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
like-
in defense of the arguments over the past few decades, and I know this is coming from me, but the arguments over the past few decades of including women in politics, I think part of the idea is more that they'll then be able to represent womankind more, even if it's costlier, even if it is, which it wasn't. So
They'll be able to represent what more?
Womankind, just females, like the female problems. Like, I mean, even women's troubles. No,
I
I'm
feel
kidding.
like politics is an inherently feminine enterprise, and it's just kind of weird how male dominated it's been, given like how much better women would be at it were it not for like the danger that comes along with it.
Yeah.
Well, I think certain aspects of it are so the actual day-to-day, like forging relationships, all that stuff. I would say women.
But the whole
better at
frenemies thing.
Yeah,
but the PR thing, getting a lot of people to buy into the cult of personality, I think that's easier with men.
Yeah,
Does that
yeah,
make
I
sense?
agree. No, that
Yeah.
in order to be a politician and have that as part, and have the cult of personality built specifically around the politician thing, there are female cult leaders. There's a couple, like
course.
the cult of Ramtha. There's
What?
The cult of Ramtha is a cult that she's channeling a 5,000-year-old warrior princess woman, and she looks like she had some work done when she was younger and then aged, and it didn't. But they interview her in like documentaries like what was that really shitty physics? What the bleep do we know? Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, what the bleep? Yeah, that's the.
I haven't listened to it, but
you don't bother. It's fine. I watched it. It's fine. It doesn't tell you anything else other than they mix like out there science with just speculation that clearly has an agenda behind it, which not always a bad thing to do, but still, it's just a shitty movie. But the Cult of Ramtha, she was interviewed for that movie, and she just started talking about boners and quantum mechanics. It was very weird, very uncomfortable, like the way we feel now. I'll show you it actually. The boner quantum mechanics thing. I swear to God, that's an actual.
Leave it in the legs.
It's not a semi. It's a
faster
superposition of flaccid and
Yes.
hard.
It's both.
Leave it in the lake.
A feeling that some would call a sexual fantasy. It only takes one sexual fantasy for a man to have a hard-on. In other words, it only takes one thought here for a man to have an erection in his member. And yet, there was nothing outside of him that gave him that. It was what was within him that gave him that. To understanding the wacky, weird world of quantum particles.
All right. Anyway, so yes, female cult leaders exist, and I wanted to say the defense would be representing womankind in a way where fine, they're kind of forcing their way into what was a boys' club and what was ran as a boys' club.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a boys' club that was running everything else. So
right. Well, that's the part, and then they would have wanted to force themselves into it because there's certain awful things happen. Which you can even look at like prohibition as sort of like the early temperance movement came out of first wave feminism, like the early suffragette kind of, because it was women getting the crap beaten out of them by their husbands, and then there wasn't like a good. Anyway, I don't. You probably would know more about this than I would because of the whole conversation around the Gamergate thing. But I mean, just because the various people who was the various people who came to your defense right away, both men and women, looked into a lot of the history of gender politics in America and seemed to have done a lot of research on it. And like Christina Hoff Sommers talks about this stuff all the time.
Just
anyway,
quick context. Quick context. When you say people came to his defense, Aaron was the person who Gamergate started around. So that pretty much like if people aren't aware of that any references, that's pretty much what Paul's referencing. But
he totally definitely determined that it was not at all just a dispute about one relationship thing. It was all ethics and games journalism, and that's. Do you want to elaborate? But okay.
I mean, it wasn't any one thing. People realized, hey, there's this hub of activity, and different interests used it as like their gathering post for the political points they wanted to make. So some people wanted to make it about online harassment against women, so they made it about that, and other people wanted to make it about ethics in journalism, so they made it about that, and then other people wanted to use it to harass women online, so they did it for that.
Is online harassment of women any worse than online harassment of men?
Statistically, no. I mean, statistically, actually, I forget the statistics on this. One, it tends to be women who harass women online more than men who harass women. And two, it seems like the two get roughly the same amount of harassment, but women get more sexual harassment.
Well, yeah.
Is iffy in itself, though, because like if you go on Call of Duty, men are sexually harassing each other all the time. It's just not perceived as that, because I'm going to rape you has a different connotation in.
But I mean, like,
and it's context dependent. Like the Terry Crews sexual assault claim, where he said he was groped by a male producer. Is that his name? Terry? Yeah. There's a big black actor who got grabbed in the junk during it's like some fancy party thing or something like that.
I know.
And he wanted to fucking kill the guy, and he didn't, because it would have looked bad.
Murder generally doesn't look good on camera.
Or he wanted to punch his face in or something. But that is like I've had my junk grabbed before by random women.
Yeah, but that would just be funny.
That happened months ago. She was on something. There was something wrong about this, but she was.
That would just be funny to me. But if like a woman grabbed my junk, that would be funny. If a guy grabbed my junk, I might punch him.
Yeah.
So like,
I don't know what I do.
You guys are sexist.
I mean,
what's the matter with a dude or a chick?
Depends on.
No, so I get it.
How pretty they are.
And I can see why women would be more sensitive to like sex threats by men. I don't know. I feel like it's an unavoidable dynamic if we're gonna have free speech. And
wait, what does free speech have to do with getting your junk groped?
No, he means he's back in the online harassment.
Online. It's unavoidable.
I used that as an example. Sorry, the Terry Crews thing, because it's like context. It's such a big deal.
Yeah, no, I wandered off for a second.
Right. No, that makes sense. But I don't know. So you guys have seen how much Twitter is just blocking everybody right now, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Meredith Patterson got a tweet blocked. There was like she was like, "Don't call me." It was like, "Don't call me an autistic" or something. It was she was saying it was someone oversimplifying autism and then using it to insult. She responded, and I guess it got picked up by the neural nets aren't properly trained or something, and they said she'd have to.
Yeah, the neural nets in the skulls of the goons that they hired.
Is it so? They're still doing it that well? Then I have to look up what her tweet was. I can.
Have you noticed how like the so-called centrist Democrats are the ones who are like really pushing the censorship thing? Like everybody's talking about how Facebook has a responsibility and how Twitter has a responsibility to make sure that the sanctity of our elections are preserved, and they don't think about the dark side of that, like the long-term implications of putting these corporations.
When you say centrist Democrats, do you mean the centrist Democratic, like the public or politicians?
Public. So people like Bill Maher, people like Sam Harris, the older Democrats.
Wait, Sam Harris is for
censorship?
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't have.
Well, not explicitly, but if you listen,
something. Is it going to his whole anti-Islam thing or something like that?
No, it's all about like we have to guard our democracy against Russia.
So we have to. About the bots and stuff, right?
About the bots and things like that. Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that if your democracy, if a foreign entity can sway the opinions of your people, then your democracy still runs on the opinions of your people. So it doesn't really matter what the entity swaying them is. I mean, we might not like the interference on a gut level because it's not their country and they have something to gain from that interference. But ultimately, it's still the point of democracy was the people get to choose. And what we're saying is that no, we only get to choose from the opinions that our politicians present us.
Right, right. And if people wanted to do that, like, then we should censor Breitbart.
Yeah,
you know, like,
which I'm sure plenty of people are
People would
up
like
for
to.
actually, but
but it's actually one of the things that sort of like nobody challenges that idea. A lot of people challenge the idea that people focus too much on Russia hacking the election and not some of the more important issues that were ignored by the Democrats. But people don't challenge the fact that everybody's calling for censorship now. Like they're calling Facebook and Twitter to testify in front of Congress, and how, like, what measures are you guys going to take to make sure that the Russians don't, mess with our elections again? And it's I think it's one of the things that people aren't talking about that's kind of scary.
yeah, no,
if you play it out 10, 20 years from now.
I don't think so. I mean, what legal grounds does the government have to go and say that this private entity needs to censor forms of speech from?
No legal ground, just a threat that they'll regulate you.
That's scary. That's like
you're enough to.
I know, right? But I mean, the fact that you're trying to leverage something that you do not have the legal power. So you're trying to leverage one set of powers to instill something you explicitly do not have the power to do.
Well, they do.
On purpose. No, well, I mean, you do not have the power to limit speech. That is.
They do.
That is. Well, I mean, no, you don't. Like, that's the First Amendment. But because you don't have that power, you go and you blackmail using some other power.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by speech, right? Like we have election donation laws. Some people think that that's, curtailing speech. I personally don't think so. But we have like the Foreign Agent Registration Act. So like RT has to register with the U.S. government as a foreign agent. There are all the, foreign companies can't just donate money straight, or foreign entities can't just donate money straight to
certainly
US politician.
And certainly, man, that's because
the
foreign entities, as not being citizens of the United States, we do not need to grant them First Amendment protections. But Facebook is an entity within the United States. It has First Amendment protections.
Yeah, but foreign entities are using, like, Facebook is not doing the speech; it's providing the platform for speech.
Sure, and so, I mean, under this reasoning, then, if I wanted to act as like a spokesperson for Russia Today, I would have to register myself as a foreign agent, even though I'm a citizen of the United States?
Potentially, yeah.
Huh.
If you were being funded by Russia, yeah.
Is that how that law works?
Like RT has U.S. citizens who work for them.
Yeah, but like if they're not publishing under the header of Russia Today, but they are doing it for Russia Today?
Right.
Or for Russia.
Or for Russia, yeah.
Or for Russia. So it's a similar thing, right? Where if you're a U.S. citizen and you're getting funded by Russia, similar kind of dynamic.
Okay, I just wanted to say real quick before we get further from the topic. The thing I was talking about with Meredith Patterson was she made a tweet that said, in large part, it was just some response to someone. In large part, that's been because of people like you telling me, quote, suck it up, Buttercup, you're mildly autistic. So other people, she was pointing at people were saying offensive things to her about her autism. And that got blocked. It said, if you feel, delete this tweet in order to, like, that's crazy that there's nothing about that tweet or that message that would appear unless it's saying mildly autistic.
Okay, wait. So is Twitter profitable? How long is this thing going to just stay in the negative?
If they're in the negative, then the board of directors, typically they're also on other boards, and so they're using their directorship, their role within Twitter to make money on the other board. It's kind of like what happened with Reddit, where they never ended up, or YouTube even, they never ended up making a profit. They just things if you had control over this unprofitable entity, you could inject stuff into the mimetic market that would help all the things that were profitable. Right. So it's just kind of fucked up because it's not being controlled by the users at all. It's not, the content is now being sifted through by entities outside of Reddit.
Well, just having a body that can control the information flow is beneficial to a certain amount of, like, to any given power centers, right? I mean, have you guys noticed that there are no more ISIS beheading videos that pop up?
I've never seen one ever, actually.
No, yeah, but I never seen one, but you always heard about them, right? Like,
Yeah, totally.
they're
No,
never-
I
they get taken down
I
now.
wanted to see the production value. I heard was incredible, and I got about 8 seconds into the actual.
Yeah,
part.
I could
Like,
never.
yep, I know what that is now. I don't need to see that anymore.
Yeah. But the point is that having that being the main platform, having it not being decentralized, and then having the government being able to convince people to censor that is of enough value that Twitter is somehow going to continue to raise money, at least for the foreseeable future. I think.
So you're saying that the profit within Twitter is what's motivating the changes to Twitter?
I think.
users?
Okay, so this is speculation,
To
but I'm
generate Twitter itself.
this is speculation, but I'm saying given the adoption of Twitter, there is inherent value in the fact that they can control information. So even if they don't
Exactly.
make money from the marketplace, there's some reason to think that they'll be able to continue generating income.
Yeah, and that's the rational argument. Probably the
Yeah.
real argument is the board of directors is addicted to Twitter.
That-
And
That's pretty funny. Oh, this is interesting. We're talking about women in politics. So in Rwanda, they have a law in the constitution that 50% of the parliament has to be women.
50% of the what? Oh, the parliament. Huh.
All right.
I don't even know how you would do that. Like,
Affirmative action, dude.
yeah, but do you only make like
Oh.
certain seats? I don't know. That's weird, right? Like every district has
Well-
2 seats, and one is up for a man, and one is up for a woman, or something like that.
That's
Probably how you would do it, right?
But if you get 2 men from one, you get 2 women from another, you still have the 50-50. So you don't necessarily have to split it down by.
You only
others,
elect
whatever.
you only
Well,
elect
you couldn't just
couples that
allow-
are married.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't
That
just
was
allow
possible.
men and women to compete and expect that
well, but
outcome. So you
then
would
with-
have to have.
It's kind of like sports, where if you mix the two together, then you just have
Wait,
men
I
in
like
top.
the idea of you vote for like a couple, like
An
a married
established
couple.
married couple.
Yeah, and like any laws they pass will probably be good for the family.
Sure. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. But Rwanda's interesting though. So, I was having a conversation with this guy. I believe it was the summer of 2016, and this is when everybody was talking about us going to Syria, and I was like vehemently against it. Against
us going to
I was
Syria?
going to Syria because I'm sure a lot of other people were as well, but I was and am still pretty convinced that a lot of the chemical attacks were either carried out by Turkish-backed militants, or they were just like atrocity propaganda used to.
There's a guy who's an hour subway ride away who we can go ask, who alleges this MIT professor you showed me.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
says that yes, he's totally certain that it's all fake and it's not. It's a big conspiracy. And I just want to be able to pay some money on a blockchain currency, put that out with like maybe 100 of my friends who I trust, or 100 of people who I trust on through, put that out there. 3D printed drone in Syria, like a small drone that's not, you check summit so it doesn't have weapons or anything. Fly it up, go take a freaking soil sample with my drone.
But you wouldn't need to do that. You wouldn't
I know,
need to.
but for me, for my own, I just, it's like
Okay, but here's
a
the
flower
thing, right?
through space, like same deal. It's
It's also kind of impressive that like a lot of people don't think that, because I was just like, okay, I really need to understand what's going on here. So I like went through the UN reports. I went through like reports in Turkish papers about it. I went through a whole bunch of stuff like this non-Western media related, and like even Carla Dopani, who was like a spokesperson for the UN, she was like, yeah, it looks like this was not the Turkish government. Like that's not what we saw originally. And then she got kicked out of the UN or of the investigative team when she made that comment.
No, she got kicked out for a much better reason. It's because she's a woman.
That's true. But it's kind of crazy because what seemed really obvious to me, just like something that any journalist who, if they were interested, could at least like the guy who was arguing that it wasn't, that it was actually the Syrian regime, was this guy named Elliot Higgins. who claims to be an expert in ballistic technology, but he was a former finance administrator who was a stay-at-home dad who got interested in the Syrian conflict, so started watching a bunch of YouTube videos about uh, like rocket technology and looking at the different like missiles that are being used in Syria. He was being quoted as an expert by like the Daily Beast, the New York Times, and everybody, and the Guardian, and they would just put him up as the counter argument to this MIT professor and uh, uh, quantum chemist, grad student, and an engineer working for Tesla, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, so it's a toss up." So we're just
They
gonna
do
go
that with climate science too.
yeah, it's just like what, like I don't understand how. But anyways, so
This is Ted the oil baron, and then this is 50 climatologists. It's
Yeah.
going to be
yeah.
a big dispute here.
But we're taught. So I'm just gonna sort of bring this back to Rwanda. The reason I was big, I was really against the intervention in Syria was because I understood that it's either we're going to Syria to stay for another 20, 30 years. If it's going to work out, we have to stay there for a really long time. And it's not really like anywhere near as likely that it would be successful because, in Korea, when we stayed, there was a group of people, first of all, they didn't have democracy soon. They stayed under a dictator for decades. And that helped them like centralize a lot of decision making and actually build up their economy before they actually like they didn't compete on global markets initially. They were pretty strongly protectionist as the US. The US put more money into South Korea than they have put into all of Africa in the rebuilding process.
Wait, really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why the image from space is like all lit up.
Yeah, it's not just like, free market capitalism. You just have it all of a sudden. It's like,
You want to set a good example by you just pump money into all the free market things, and that makes wait, that's not a free market then.
yeah. No, I mean,
That's really
obviously,
great. When a big country like has some interest in you as a small country doing well,
mhm.
like Albania went through like 2 iterations of that. Once with Russia, and then there's like kept funneling resources into Albania,
Yeah.
and then once after relations with Russia sort of went downhill, then China, who, from what I understand, was much worse at the resources they were giving Albania. It was like the shitty Chinese labor was the view.
Oh, it's so bad. When they
spoiled.
build things, it just breaks so fast. It's terrible. But anyway, so my whole point with that was like, it's gonna take. If we're doing this, we can't just like half-assedly do this. We really have to do it. And then people bring up Rwanda, where it's just like we saw the genocide in Rwanda, and we said never again. We're not gonna let a lot of people die without intervening. But here's the interesting thing, right? We didn't intervene in Rwanda. What we saw was awful. But Kagame took power and he centralized it. And Rwanda, since the genocide, they've actually tripled the income for the people.
Yeah, that's the thing that I always wondered. What's worse, like perpetually warring factions, or an oppressive authoritarian regime?
Oh,
I think the answer to that is clear.
Periodic catastrophe versus low-level constant conflict. But anyway, go ahead.
I think the answer to that is clear. So, like being from Liberia, one of the worst things we had was that we had a guy, a 26-year-old guy, took power in 1980 because he was an indigenous, and the Americo-Liberians, the former American slaves, had gone and they held power for a long time. So there was resentment, whatever, like Rhodesia, but slightly darker.
So is your mom is from this population?
So my mom is indigenous, and my dad is a descendant of a former slave.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Welcome to America.
Thank you.
Welcome back. But nicer terms this time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But the guy took over, and he was shitty. So the society declined for 10 years straight. Like the sewage systems, the educational system, everything that people had sort of, worked to put together. It's just like a steady decline. But he got a lot of money from the US, and he invested into things like Mercedes, a huge Ministry of Defense, and a football stadium. So that was great. But then after that, in 1989, or really 1990, there was a war. and the war didn't just end. It went, it was like on and off from late 1989, 1990 until 2003, and then we had a provisional government in 2005. And to me, it was clear like 250,000 people died, and that sucked. But it would have been better if like 400,000 people died, and it happened in like the span of 6 months or something like that, and the entire society didn't completely disintegrate. There was centralized power, and then people could rebuild. Because when you have like a generation or two of people
happened is
like
Pakistan, yeah,
not going to school, not doing anything, like being completely disconnected from their family structures, and then all of a sudden it's just like, okay, there's no war. Like, where do you start, right? It's a much more difficult problem.
That gets back to like the definition of genocide has a genocide, like you're killing off a people,
Right.
and there is a killing off a culture. And so if you killed off more people but less culture, is that the same?
That's a good
genocide level.
That's a good point, right? Like, so I don't know. So, but I'm just talking like Rwanda is. I don't want to say it's a good example because, like, one of the good things is that they were really blessed with a great leader. Like
who?
Kagame, Paul Kagame.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, the guy. All right. Okay.
I mean, he's under no illusions about democracy. So he won the last election with 96% of the vote.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah. So okay.
He must be a really good. Yeah, everyone loves him.
Yeah. He's really, really popular.
Yeah.
Totally.
But when he took power, he traveled to Shanghai. He traveled to Asia, basically, China and all the other smaller countries around there. They got out of poverty really fast, and he just like met everybody, took a bunch of notes, and was like, okay, we're going to implement that in Rwanda, and it's been working pretty well. So well that a lot of times when African leaders are talking about development plans, they're always referencing the Rwanda model. Now, I don't know if I like that, because if a country is already in democracy, going from that to a dictator for development purposes pretty much guarantees conflict in the future.
Yeah.
But it says a lot that you could have a country like Rwanda, where unlike like Zimbabwe, where I guess the difference between Rwanda and Zimbabwe is that Mugabe is a Marxist, and Kagame is an authoritarian capitalist.
Oh. So then the hyperinflation and the disaster, do you think they're just, well, are they now, was Kagame was.
Wait, something just sounds weird about authoritarian capitalists.
Why?
Yeah, why?
The U.S. has state capitalism. It's technically not authoritarian, but
his friends are all ANCAPs. So
yeah, like anarcho-capitalism, that makes sense to me. But it seems like these two things are at odds a bit.
No, I think
anarcho-capitalists would hate authoritarian.
No, but just capitalism with authoritarianism, it seems somewhat at odds, because like it's free market, except unless we say not.
If you listen, so George Soros gave some great lectures I was listening to recently, where he talks about the agency problem, so to speak. But it's basically like why politicians will always be corrupt in some way if you have a free society. Although there are things you can do to curb that. But I think state capitalism is inevitable, just from like the perspective of democracies and competition, because like state capitalism is obviously an advantage for any given country economically.
Yeah. So they'll adopt that
and because it's like
just more types of circumstances. They'll end up,
right, because you have to compete, because democracy, people are, electing you so that you can make your country more competitive.
Are you hoping that happens in Zimbabwe?
I'm just
without a genocide. Without a genocide first.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't see democracy working, like true democracy working. Okay, they can have a democracy, but I think they should have some kind of centralized decision making initially, because I think if you have a population of like 70% illiterate people or whatever, they're not going to make good decisions. And in terms of building your economy. It's just not gonna happen. Like
when our democracy was bootstrapped, a huge fraction of the populace was literate. They, like and very literate. Like,
yeah, I mean, so
they were
well,
naturally
they talk about this in the Federalist Papers. Actually, that was like one of the benefits of American democracy. They talk about like America's like made up of wise people who were intelligent, and that was like why they felt like American democracy could work. People
at a federal scale rather than
when
just being,
Finland was recovering from was it World War whatever, when Finland was recovering from one of the huge wars, there was like a very constant push. All right, we need to get our populace educated first and foremost. All the resources in education, and then built from there. Supposedly, at least this is the story that is pitched by the education experts. And now Finland is doing quite well, and also they have a really good education system by a bunch of standards. I
mean, I think it's infrastructure first and then education.
So apparently Finland we need education to get the infrastructure, but I can see the chicken and egg problem there.
Well, I'm sure they had some like baseline. I mean, it depends on how like bad your roads are, right? So if your farmers have a problem like getting their crops to the port to sell or to the cities to sell because the roads are just too shitty.
Yeah.
That's in countries where you have like deep jungle, that might be more of an issue. Countries where you don't, because building roads don't degrade as fast if you don't have like 4 months out of the year where it's just like raining nonstop and things like that.
Having an economically viable frontier, like a big one that hasn't been taken yet. I mean, there were people there, but they just ended up dying mostly of disease and murder. But the having that as kind of, it's almost like a steam release valve or something, where like you can see it in the shape of the country as you move across, like the territories would just be like, oh, land west of the blah, and then California is like but it is not like the East Coast, right? But it's because the way the East Coast was settled was like port cities and stuff. Like downtown Boston is a nightmare to drive in, and that's because it was, all those roads are from colonial days and stuff. Right. It was like carriages.
Tiny.
Happened later when they split it up by a grid. It's not a center margin thing.
Right.
And so it's still a port thing, but it's a different kind of, the Hudson and but I think having that transference of New York is now the biggest sort of most mimetically powerful, and also biggest, just I guess 11 million people. I don't know. There's a lot of people come in and out of Manhattan, but like in terms of the influence, I guess New York has taken over from Boston, right? Largely, but from
was it ever not more influential in Boston? I mean, maybe in like the late 1700s.
So while the colonists actually lost the famous Battle of Bunker Hill, which was technically fought on Breed's Hill, the British suffered such heavy casualties that soon thereafter they were forced to abandon Boston. But then they got some revenge by taking over New York, which they held for most of the rest of the war. But in thinking about the war, it's very important to understand that not all colonists were pro-independence. Like elites in colonies like New York and Pennsylvania were very nervous about all this revolutionary fervor that was whipping up artisans and small-time farmers to think that they deserved to have say in the political process. Having
room to expand and change centers of power. Philadelphia used to be, and now it's DC is the capital, and moving around like that, and having steam, like I was saying, steam release valves or something for where this is sort of you can promise people that if they work hard and also turn kind of psycho and kill the locals, they can have the land west of this area, and that resolves disputes about the land, here where you're on right now, where you're, you get the land further there that I don't care about, that's unsettled, and maybe in 10 years it'll be more profitable for you. You can just keep doing that, and then we kind of hit the other end, and then there was the railroad tech showed up right as we sort of swept back and forth. And then now it's just sort of economic internet, Silicon Valley kind of weird bouncing back and forth. And now the coasts are all linked, but maybe Elon Musk's Hyperloop will, but that's gonna go up actually. But anyway, not horizontal. But I guess that's something that nowadays when we talk about bootstrapping or jumpstarting or whatever, injecting democracy into different places, there isn't an easy carryover. It happened under a particular set of circumstances back then. And like you were saying, the populace was very literate. You mentioned infrastructure being in place. You could sort of argue that like there was all this colonial infrastructure because we were a colony, and then we just took that when we became a democracy and we became a nation of our own. And so I guess there's that infrastructure, but like the education of the populace was the primary. You were saying infrastructure first, or maybe you were saying they were saying infrastructure first, right?
I mean, it sort of depends on the time frame also, so that's one thing to consider.
Are we looking to get win the hearts and minds within 4 to 6 years? Oh, all right.
All right,
dude.
see it.
Oh, you're out, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's got it.
Yeah, I had to head home. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But I'll
you
come.
live here, but you're
yeah.
heading back to
Yeah,
your
I'm heading
parents.
Thanksgiving weekend. But for the next one.
Yeah,
Onward and upward. There you go.
cool.
All right.
Yeah.
So now it's just me.
Oh, damn it, just Paul.
I know.
How terrible.
It's a disaster. So what were we talking about? I guess I kind of wanted to talk about the Saudi Arabia thing, but I don't know enough about it. I just know the House of Saud got huge, a lot of males.
I don't know that much about it. I mean,
We just keep talking about
well, okay. So what I've read, like the research I've done into it was basically it's relatively superficial, but it still like encompasses what happens like before and slightly after World War II, basically. And it has to do with Saudi Arabia and Iran. So obviously, like Saudi Arabia was just like a backwards place in the Middle East until we discovered they had all this oil. And then
pastoralists on a black gold mine. It was just a bunch of shepherds
Basically.
and stuff, right? Yeah.
Basically, and I mean there are videos of like Ibn Saud, who is the founder of the House of Saud, that became the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, meeting with FDR and forming a relationship because of the importance of the oil trade, right? So you have that happening on one hand, and then you have the whole situation happening with Iran on the other hand. Where the British were making deals with the Iranians to have access to their oil, and so there's this common thread, especially in left-wing media, that the reason for the Ayatollah Khomeini was that the West was unfair in overthrowing the what's the name of the guy? He was overthrown by
The Shah?
Not the Shah. He was overthrown, and they put the Shah in 1950.
Oh, we're not there yet. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know enough Iranian history.
The main party to benefit from this openness was Tudeh, the Iranian Communist Party. Mohammad Mossadegh was elected prime minister in 1951 and led the parliament to nationalize Iran's oil industry, and that was the end of the democratic experiment. Now, most history books say that in 1953, the British and the CIA engineered a coup to remove Mossadegh from office. And that is quite possibly true. It is definitely true that we tried to engineer a coup. It's also true that Mossadegh quit and fled Iran following demonstrations against him. But we also know that the Shia clergy encouraged those demonstrations. That's a bit of a weird decision for the clergy, considering that Shia Islam traditionally takes a radical stance against oppression. But it's important to remember that Mossadegh was supported by the Tudeh party, and they were communists.
So you have sort of two things happening, right? Ibn Saud found Saudi Arabia. They have a lot of money. He had 45 children.
Yeah. I saw this in the Caspian Report thing. Yeah.
And he had like a bunch, so they like distributed power. They had enough money. Everybody's getting along. And then you have the Shah of Iran, who was fairly Western. And he was actually pretty good friends with the King of Saudi Arabia. They used to write letters back and forth to each other. Some that are publicly available, actually.
Love letters. Yeah, it was really passionate.
I don't know that there were love letters.
Just trying to make it light. Carry on.
Yeah, no, I got you. And the Shah would actually say, "Hey, we need to modernize. King of Saudi Arabia, your women should be able to wear bikinis and things like that." And then the king of Saudi Arabia was like, yeah, no, I get it. I'm down with all those things. But remember, you're the king of or you're heading a Muslim country. But the Shah was
You got to take baby steps.
baby steps, right? And not just a Muslim country. Well, I mean,
No, it's well, Arab Muslim.
Arab Muslim.
That's important. I mean,
Right.
it's hey man, it's in the Quran itself. The Bedouins, right, are greater in hypocrisy, and it's anyway. Carry on.
Yeah. So, but then in 1979, obviously, Ayatollah Khomeini took power, and there was immediately, because the king of Saudi Arabia had a good relationship with the Shah of Iran, so immediately there was friction. And the Iranians started using propaganda to turn the Shias inside of Sunni Saudi Arabia against the Shia regime, and you know, sowing discord there. The Saudi Arabians were able to quench whatever discord there was because of Iranian propaganda.
Squash and quell.
So that like was the basis. Like since 1979, they've been feuding. It's why they formed the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is basically like all the Arab countries, like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, like all these Arab countries are basically
Bond villains
against Iranian influence. Right?
Oh, now is there? So I know is majority in most places, but there's certain countries where they're not the majority, and so then you end up with like
the
Sunni versus Shia. So they came from like a very early split, right? In Islam, it's like which part of the family you're gonna, or like the most qualified versus direct descendant from.
Yeah, I mean there were like 5 descendants after Muhammad, and it was like going back and forth, and eventually they just split.
Very Talmudic, very splitting the gotta be consistent.
It's like who's the actual descendant of Muhammad. But what I haven't, and I need to look more into this, is like why they haven't been able to reconcile their issues. Because so there's the Iran-Iraq war. It lasts for 10 years. The Saudis might have been supporting Saddam Hussein, and that may be the basis for like the strong distrust, and always an incentive for politicians to stir up hate against Saudi Arabia and Iran. But since 1990, hypothetically, there isn't a reason that they shouldn't get along, or there certainly isn't a reason that Iran would be supporting Houthi militants in Yemen to try to destabilize Saudi Arabia. I mean, it seems to me that their interests aren't like, other than the relationships that they've sort of cultivated, their fundamental economic interests aren't so misaligned that they shouldn't be able to strike some sort of deal. But it is.
So I wonder, is there some?
I don't understand it well enough. I need to do more. Huh?
Is there some reason why there's some?
I think it's the relationship
influence.
I think it's the relationships they've cultivated. That's like Saudi Arabia is aligned with Israel right now. They're building like this mega city together that's going to be like worth $500 billion.
Shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
$500 billion.
$500 billion, and it's like it's going to be.
Setting...
Huh?
Oh, is it private island? But okay, yeah, no, 500 billion
like,
would be a city.
It's supposed to be like a modern city, so it's like it's all it's like a lot of AI thoughts being integrated into the city. The transportation infrastructure is meant to reflect like the 21st century technologies and not sort of like adapting it slowly.
There's something about a city in a desert.
Mm-hmm.
There's just it's like a big middle finger to God or something. Like anything where there's it's like really, really thermodynamically odd for for a great ape to be hanging out in this particular place, and has to just pump air conditioning into every and there's like a whole culture built around how everything is thermodynamically cranked up. Like, I mean, stuff like violent protests happens way more frequently when warm. There's a thermal component to human behavior, and it plays out in everything, in our hygiene, in which diseases spread where. the whole ecosystem of an area, or lack thereof in the case of a desert. It's not that it lacks an ecosystem, there is one, but it's a very different, thermodynamically odd place to put a whole bunch of people, especially very wealthy people who would like a wealthy lifestyle. Like I don't know, it's just deserts are interesting to put humans. We're sort of savanna things.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well, if you have enough Lamborghinis, I feel like you can do pretty much anything you want to do.
I have a friend who was, I think he was friends with someone from Saudi Arabia who would send him, when we were in high school, he would send my friend was already kind of rich, but he would send my friend like insanely and like tacky kind of expensive gifts. Like I remember they had sunglasses that were headphones back when that was really kind of cool, new or something, and they were like $500, which isn't, I guess, not that much, but it was. He said other things like that where they were kind of equally silly, but also very, very expensive.
Right.
Like the app, you just buy it and it's for $1,000, but they're and then he died in a car crash, so that was not my friend, but his friend.
Absolutely.
But yeah, well, the thing I think is like, if you can't just, the idea of going through adolescence with that level of money and just like nihilistic fury and just all converging, and then you're in the middle of just an odd situation to grow up into. No wonder it's like that Louis bit where like, how is that guy not going to be a complete asshole? You've been, raping chambermaids and drinking chocolate your whole life. You're the son of the king. You're a horrible person. Well, of course. But
people I know who grew up with like, it's not even, it's relative wealth. Just growing up and having people it's not just like the fact that you're drinking chocolate. It's the fact that you're drinking chocolate and everybody else wants to drink chocolate and they can't drink chocolate.
Right. Local inequality. Peterson talks about that, actually. It's inequality in wealth that actually causes
the
violent
problem.
conflict.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a weird one. And, like, it's not going to change anytime soon. Oh, so did you see that Slate Star Codex?
Which one? How recent?
I posted
today. On the
Meditations on Moloch.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a famous one by him. Yeah. I mean, I haven't read it up recently, so I might mix a bunch of his other stuff with it in order to. But yeah. So you read Meditations on Moloch?
Mm-hmm. It's really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Scott is a very good blogger. He's a very good blogger.
Yeah. How often I don't follow that much. How often does he put stuff out?
Oh, all the time. Sometimes I'm like, you have to have been staggering these, because you published like 5 really, really articulate breakdowns of some complex topic, and it was in like over the course of 4 days. So it's usually like right after they do like a meetup, like a Less Wrong is the group, the Eliezer Yudkowsky guy.
Yeah.
But then when he is the, what is it? Not the Shah. What's the rightful caliph is Eliezer Yudkowsky, and then
rightful caliph of what?
Caliph. Okay, yeah. Less Wrong.
Oh.
Less Wrong is the name of the. So Less Wrong is like a group started years and years ago. They have a website, lesswrong.com or net.com, whatever, org, something. Just look up Less Wrong, and it's sort of a rationalist nerd community. They kind of birthed neo-reaction. I mean, look, Eliezer Yudkowsky posted like a politics is the mind killer, and then like a month later, Moldbug's first post appeared for. So I mean, I don't know. Moldbug. Sorry, you'll eventually learn about him if you keep reading more Slate Star Codex. But Moldbug is the guy who is sort of the guy who, in that article, I say the Politico article, he's talking to Bannon a lot now, and that's intellectualizing the far right. That's what neo-reaction is. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I know. Man, that's neo-reaction is that's not going away.
Yeah. Trump is a Kantian. Trump is way stool.
Wait, so that was that guy?
Yes. So that's the irony. Being layered in irony is a defense mechanism, especially when you're espousing some of the stuff Moldbug talks about. So using heavily layering irony and being like, sorry, not sorry, or haha, only serious. That sort of thing is an aesthetic now. Partly because there's just so fucking much you can't say, and so it has to be. I think actually Colbert might be partly responsible for this, just because his show, he openly admitted that like if he was called on something, he could just say it's a comedy show. I'm joking, and it was, and he was. But like what the distinction between a joke and not a joke is in the mind of the beholder. That's why comedians get mad, and there's a whole big debate about, oh, I was just joking. Oh, they took it seriously. Oh, well, then back and forth, and like, and the Columbine kids having the Matrix aesthetic. Did we blame the Matrix people? Like, there's at a certain point, it's so detached, you just blame everyone who makes guns or something, and when a gun thing, obviously there's a limit. But if you're specifically making a joke about a thing and then not like the laughter is done in such a way where it's not clear whether you're for or against, and maybe that's even where the humor comes from, that's a whole other level. Like if you look at Ku Klux Klan ranks are very, I mean, it's Grand Wizard. It was LARPing. It was like not a joke because they fucking killed people. So it was initially presented as a sort of a Crowley type kind of, again, a mixture of irony and the real. And so that's scary to think that then can become real. I don't know, but yeah.
No,
so
right.
Yeah, the
it's
Kant
actually interesting for me to read Meditations in Moloch, and then reading Snow Crash today.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's really interesting. It's when I'm done, we'll do a whole thing on it. But it's
okay.
It's basically like libertarianism taken to its absurd endpoint in some ways.
Well, I think it would be the points where it fails, especially with the internet, would be like meth, or what's the drug that's in Russia that's killing all those people, and then the stuff that the media content that can't, so like kid stuff. Those are the two things where the libertarian paradise, even in a place where everybody's well educated and stuff, it just doesn't work.
Are we sure about that?
What?
Like,
do you think the market will self-regulate against the most awful things humans do?
But we could have, like, all drugs could be legal,
right?
With certain types of regulation, and it could still work.
It's still ultimately both of it would come down to kids, because that's the situation where you'll have people who are probably smart enough to find out a way to get themselves into serious trouble, but they don't have any. There's not a blame assigned to them, certainly not a legal one, and so it's the same deal. Ultimately, it's that there's a new crop of humans at any given moment. That's part of the human condition. Is that some of us are on the way out, some of us are on the way in. And the ones on the way in, it's all new, which is amazing, and it probably makes being a parent really cool. But like it's scary because
but okay, so vulnerable. Here's what I'm imagining, right? So the main problem is that you're taking a problem that people have, and then you're locking them up for it. It's not just a matter of whether or not the drugs are available or not. Because like if a kid really wanted to get his hand on some crystal meth, I'm sure they could figure out a way to do it.
But it's being like, let's say the kid had a 3D printer in their home at the molecular level. That's the situation where the kid just has to press a button. And I'm not saying we're there yet, but like the technological adjacency and arbitrary, anything within a spectrum of possible molecules or a range of possible molecules, you can just generate any of those things, which there may be physical restraints on that, but probably not for drugs, how we can make it the regular way.
Speculate about something like that, because
think
about a society where that technology is possible, like
Star Trek. What is the replicator, right?
What does being a kid even mean in that context?
I know.
Or what does addiction even mean in that context?
I guess it's defined by what would be a deleterious state to be in, like what would be a maladaptive way to be given the society you're in.
Sure,
So,
but
like,
why would anybody want to do Why would anybody want to do meth if you could just like use a machine and make any drug that you wanted? Because I feel like
well, from what I hear, meth's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, but there would be safe versions of meth probably.
Right,
They
and in
give
Star
you,
Trek,
like,
they
better
have
highs.
in Star Trek Next Generation they had synthahol,
What
which was
that?
alcohol that and it would give you the buzz, but it would not get you drunk past a certain point. You just keep drinking and it wouldn't affect you.
Yeah, and there'd be no
It's
hangover.
just like the best of all worlds.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
that sketch by the British comedy duo but they have one where there's a whole secret society of men who've had, I think it's like men who had exactly 1.5 drinks, and it's right at that sweet spot, the Balmer Peak or whatever, or maybe the Balmer Peak's later down the thing, but the sweet spot where you're buzzed enough that it's working, but you're not starting to sound retarded. So
yeah, it's my favorite.
anyway, so yeah, what were you? Yeah, yes, that's you can just stay there. Which then, like, what if you had like a Martian society or something where there was some aspect of living in that society, something about air filtration or something that required everyone to be on a drug in order to be in that society. Are they? Well, yeah, so exactly. Right, depends on the drug, right? But like, and what if some traditional societies where drug use is just par for the course, it's regular part of their culture, and actually then that becomes a whole religious protection things. That's why there's certain like ayahuasca and certain other things that are, I think, peyote or one of these things are allowed to be used by Native Americans in their own rituals still, which nowadays is just like
mescaline
going tripping on the what.
Is it mescaline?
Is it mescaline? Maybe it's mescaline. Is mescaline like an old ancient one?
I think maybe not like the extracted synthetic form, but I think peyote.
Oh, that's probably it. Yeah.
Peyote. Yeah. Heard about that.
Okay. Oh, did I say?
I would never try it though.
Yeah. Oh, the cactus? Yeah. No, totally. Yeah.
I would never ever do it.
Never do that. Very bad. But what were we talking about? House of Saud, Libertarian Paradise. You were talking about Zimbabwe, and I feel like.
Oh no, we're talking about the House of Saud.
Okay. Yeah.
And just like, I guess the interesting stuff that's happening right now, like if we just accept it, they're just locked in it, right? Because the U.S. is allies with Saudi Arabia. They're really trying to make sure that Iran doesn't get nukes, because if Iran gets nukes, then Saudi Arabia will probably have to get nukes, and Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Iran have nukes. That's really not too good.
No, man, it'll be like mutually assured destruction in the Middle East. It'll be very stable. Don't worry. I'm sure they'll handle it the same way.
It'll be actually mutually assured destruction.
Yes, and mutually assured and soon.
But yeah, also so like it's weird. Like the only pro Saudi politician in Lebanon just resigned while he was in Saudi Arabia, which I don't get. People were like, "Oh, it was meant to break up like Hezbollah or something." So, or like the Hezbollah ruling faction, but it's not going to, because Hezbollah. So I don't really know enough about that entire situation. I need to look. But the one thing I do know is what's going on in Yemen is just like beyond fucked up.
There's like 1 million people on the brink of starvation, right?
It's like several million people are like in the brink of starvation. Like more than 1 million people have cholera.
Yeah, that's if you is this? I'm assuming are these displaced people?
No, so they like bombed with our help. They bombed their electricity grid, which basically means that the water can't be refined.
Yep. Yeah.
So
it's like holding a whole country hostage. It's so fucked up.
Yeah,
anything where you're inducing a famine.
Yeah. I mean, it's what we did in North Korea. We bombed their dam system, and 2 million people died in the Korean War.
Shit, I didn't.
Yeah.
Hey man, we had to beat communism.
Well, I mean, Korea's ended up pretty well, all things considered, I suppose. But
South Korea.
South Korea, and I'm
Yeah. Well, but you said we funneled a bunch of money in. The Korean people are highly industrialized and industrious and organized people. I mean, they their whole language was constructed. Their written language, I think.
Well, that's the
was
thing, right?
just-
So even if we pumped as much money into other societies, they wouldn't end up being South Korea.
It doesn't translate.
Like, so I probably should have mentioned that earlier. But it does, like, it still says a lot that much money was pumped in.
Yeah.
But my point is that when you have something like that, a monster like North Korea could emerge.
Right.
So what's happening?
Oh, okay. Huh. Would it be off the same way? I mean, just given how, yeah, I guess it. So where do you think it would show up? I mean, what you're just saying because you're saying if they started getting nukes, or
just like the baseline ideas in the society.
Oh, what
Like people
like
would be,
the proto-communist or the
no, just people are so like they've gone through so much shit and they're so traumatized that anybody who and they associate it with one other group of people, so it'd be like the Saudis and the Americans. Anybody who says fuck those people, I'm going to provide stability and we're going to kill all of them, those people are going to be in power pretty much indefinitely.
yeah.
I don't know how you even avoid that with the situation in Yemen right now, but I know that what we're doing is not going to make it better. And I mean, but beyond that, it's just like, let's say it's not technically genocide, it's just as bad. I mean, just like starving
a bunch of
women
people
and children.
Like, if it's intentionally done that way, that's what makes it a genocide, isn't it? If it's starvation that does it, or if it's you.
Yeah, but technically they're not doing it to get rid of a group of people. They're doing it, to go against like the Houthis, to make sure the Houthis don't get weapons and things. So it's not like Rwanda where it's just like, okay, we're going to exterminate this group of people, or the Holocaust,
right?
Or like the Armenian genocide, or Turkey's like purging of Kurdish people and things like that.
There's often an ethnic dimension that is in a global context will just kind of not like it's not even covered up in some weird way. It just doesn't. Nobody knows what it would mean on a large scale. So what is the difference between a Houthi and a Tutsi? Hutu and a Tutsi. Houthi. Yeah. Well, that's the combo. But no, Hutu and a Tutsi. Like the distinction between the two before, like leading up to the genocide. I know, for example, that the Tutsi minority were like entirely lactase persistent, and it's like it's a distinct population, and then the Hutu are generally not. They're like 1/3 of them maybe have some lactase persistence. So in order to be a pastoralist, you end up with a I might have actually mentioned this in like a previous podcast we did, but yeah, in order to be pastoralist, or in order to be successful in a pastoralist economy, pastoral economy. It's a milk economy, and so it's the number of cows that you own. If you can't feed your own family, and it's something that you can't learn, it's not like a technique, it's whether you can digest milk or not. That distinction can, in the long term, it would lead to, if not the precursor for a genocide, it would at least exacerbate whatever existing tensions were there because of the
well, I mean, they cohabitated for a long time with no problems. The main issue is the Belgians.
Yep. Yeah, and it's when you separate them by that, and then you just ditch, you just fuck it up and leave, and that's.
And then I believe it was the president of the Hutus got killed somewhere or the other, and then people were just like, oh, it's the Tutsis' fault, and we're going to get rid of all of them. We're going to kill them. They're cockroaches. And like the military is literally handing out machetes to people, being like, just go kill these people.
It's the last big, as like in the last podcast we did, I mentioned it. It's like the last big radio genocide was Rwanda. Maybe one day there'll be a podcast genocide. That was a really fucked up joke. I'm sorry.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
But going back to
no, I just meant going from radio as a medium to going to never mind. Sorry.
Yeah. No, but looking at the situation in Saudi Arabia right now, it's kind of hard to get your head around what's happening, right? So there's a purge happening. The Saudis are meeting with the Russians. What? The Saudis are meeting with the Russians. What's happening?
What
And
does
then
that mean?
the Saudis have never met with
Are
the
they
Russians.
bots? Okay.
The Saudis have never met with the Russians. And the Russians are impromptu allies with the Iranians, but they're meeting with the Saudis. And the Saudis, who have relations with the Americans, would never meet what the Russians are. So maybe like American democracy is not seen as stable enough. And I think the chips are falling into place, and we don't really, or at least for somebody like
They're
me,
still bouncing, and we're about to see where they fall.
yeah, I think next week I'll do a lot more research into this. This will be my what little time I have, but whatever reading I do will be to sort of understand the situation a little bit better, and maybe we can discuss it next week.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think you said yoga at 1:30, so we gotta.
No,
Oh, you're good. Okay, let's keep
It's
going.
not gonna happen anymore. It's 1:25.
Oh, okay. Oh, it
Yeah.
starts
Well,
at 1:30.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. Then
I'm just gonna put it on TV and do some of my living.
yoga. That's what you were going for anyway. Was to see
Yeah.
all the other people doing yoga.
Yeah, hot girls. Wait, what? Did I say that?
Yoga pants. We are not in yoga pants season, but you can see it if you go to yoga.
Yeah.
Strange shit is afoot in the world, man.
Yeah, totally new. That never happens.
Yeah, there was some. I saw this on Tumblr or something. There was some news headline from like 1959. That was like, "Strange things are afoot in the world," or "Strange things are happening in the world." And it was like 1959. And so like, all right, either we've been on like a for at least, or it's just always like this. Like Peterson says, to be alive is to be in trouble. It's like, it's to be conscious is like, there's this, you're gonna die. It's probably not gonna be fun. Oh, it's gonna be shitty. You're lucky if it's not. And there's, yeah, a lot of suffering on the way, but
There's a lot of good shit too.
where you are. What?
A lot of good stuff too. I think we tend to not emphasize that as much because of the suffering,
Yeah.
but you can adjust that perspective.
And actually, I would say, so getting back to the Slate Star Codex stuff, I would say doing ethics math is one of the things that it scares me when they do it, but that the rationalists do often, and they'll often conclude something that'll be like, shit, I have to, yeah, I am. If I would do this, there's no way I then can say have a moral stance against this. And there's sort of this arguing that they did.
I don't know, dude. I've just seen like there's this libertarian dude I'm friends with on Facebook who just argued that we should like certain aspects, like people should be allowed to shoot child pornography because it leads to better outcomes.
Yeah,
I was just like,
this is a Facebook friend.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
no, but it was like,
maybe turn them into acquaintance. Click, right? You can lower the status.
No, but the idea was that if you consider all the possible outcomes, like certain things about it should be illegal, but certain things should be illegal, and it would like have better outcomes in terms of pedophiles and things like that. But at a certain point, it's just like, you know, no, that shouldn't be.
No, there's the fucking no. That is a valid response. That is a valid response, even to, and this is the getting back to the rationalists, the argument that if we do that, it may be morally consistent, but the local populace will get pitchforks and torches and come murder us. That and rightfully so. That is an actual. You can make that argument because then you're like, well, that's a terminal outcome unless we can somehow keep the populace at bay or trick them into. But there's so that moral math you should include the it's just like including the possibility that this program will turn into Skynet and kill us all. That, while very low, would be, you know, infinitely bad. And so if you include that in your programs as a catastrophic outcome, suddenly all the probabilities are thrown off because if you make a smart enough AI, I'm sorry, but it
No,
was
I
an
get-
XKCD joke.
No,
Yeah.
I get it. It's something that the feudalists read like conservatarians because they're like people who are libertarian because they think there's something inherently ethical about marketplaces and how they distribute resources.
Inherently ethical. Yeah.
Or ethical in that they distribute resources in the most to the people who deserve them most, right?
Right, and it's where the deserving part. That's where the distinction. And I would just say that I get that argument, and it makes sense given all the other systems that have existed and how they have marginalized and fucked over so many people within each of them.
Mhm.
It's just in the moment when you're in the midst of that system and you see like, oh, there's a guy, he's a hobo, and like if you were just it wouldn't cost that much. I know he's crazy. That's probably why he's out homeless, even though there are homeless shelters and stuff. But like crazy people can still be if you just you find a way, like some way. I mean, even just like assigning, tagging images or something to get them out off the street so that they're not. But then if they're crazy and they don't. But my point is that capitalism has these fail states that I understand that in aggregate they're lower in well at the scales that those fail states are smaller and less disastrous than some of the fail states in say communism, but they're still there, and it's like you want to, but I think
Well, they're not
libertarians
sustainable.
charity.
They're not sustainable.
What aren't sustainable?
Those fail states. And
Oh,
this is one of the
right,
interesting
being-
things about
yeah,
reading Snow Crash, and we'll talk about it later. But they're, one of the things they bring up in the first chapter is that at some point in the future, like the U.S. just becomes like a hellscape because compared to like the market is global, right? So resources are distributed in a way where like a Pakistani farmer would feel like they're much better off. But because everybody's like competing on the same ground and there's no like there are no sort of minimum standards, so market arbitrage is basically happening and regulatory arbitrage is happening, and people are like choosing the tax frameworks they want. People are choosing the lowest labor standards. At some point, like no matter like how much protectionism any given society does, like certain societies are just going to be so much worse off that it's just not going to be a sustainable system. And
that society wouldn't be sustainable, and then what, it would be taken over.
It's not going to be considered sustainable by many of the inhabitants of that society. So I mean, we'll see what's like. So for example, like the cryptocurrency boom, the AI boom, these things they're about to happen soon. That people like you and me who are not rich, we're middle class, but we are aware of technological evolution, and we try to take advantage of these different things happening. That's like even for our generation, that's a small percentage of people.
Yeah, I've no, yeah.
Like, so, I'm an attorney, and that's supposed to be like a really, you do that and you're set.
Yep, it was supposed to be a portable, very portable. You could, your shtetl could get, pogromed, and then you go to the you still be able to practice law. But
and I mean, I probably will be, and will be like relative to the population will be fine. But if you compare that to what it used to be, and then extrapolate what that trend means for the entire society, you wonder if like the logic of what I like to consider the feudalists, and you're talking about the pitchforks. Like, at what point does that actually just have to come out? And it's not always going to be Trump. It might be someone else that's further left, but is just as much of an authoritarian.
Yeah, or authoritarian, because the pitchforks come about as a result of sort of populism, and then I guess it's othering, that sort of thing. But I mean, you're saying that Trump is an example of a pitchfork thing, or is it a response to it?
My point is, I can see more socialist type authoritarianism happening in the United States because of the distribution of income and the fact that people think that there's something inherently ethical about the way that that resources are distributed, or just like, you know, it's easy for people to just say, well, life isn't fair, especially when you have the resources. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Life is not fair, but
Right.
that's
It
not.
also
That,
isn't
I guess
fair
that's
when
not a.
it's
not a
also
cause
not
covered in-
fair when the proletariat, when you have a dictatorship by the proletariat, is also not fair, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
It's degrees of it's very much, and this is again Slave Star Codex stuff, but it's this. You ever heard this? The walked away from Omelas. The those who walk away from Omelas. The
No.
story. I don't know. I've only ever read it actually, but it's the idea is that there's this town that runs perfectly, except right at the middle of the town in a small room, there's this like a child that's tortured horribly all the time, and everything else around the town runs perfectly, and it's as a result of that in some weird way. I think that's the. I mean, there was a Star Trek episode too where they landed on a planet and everyone had these ridiculous outfits. That if you go back and watch it, they have
it was like perfect.
toe, and it's really
Perfect.
what.
It was perfect, but if you did any like one little thing, they just killed you.
Yes, there was an alien god thing in the sky that would zap you, and it was very interesting because they implied that the rules could be broken, and they were only randomly enforced, which is what that's how most rules like drug, LSD, manufacturing LSD probably happens in like a couple labs in the country, but they make enough for the whole East Coast or something, and so then they make the penalties extreme because they're only going to catch it occasionally. And they have to really clamp down. Whereas the pot stuff, they'll swing in the other direction because they can, it's ubiquitous and they catch it all the time. But I guess the sort of the cracking down on something it's a sort of a form of fascism, much like what we're seeing. And this is again, I know you might disagree, but what we're seeing in certain colleges where you don't know what the particular comment will be that will get you fired as a professor. But once you veer into a particular subject matter and are not constantly prostrating yourself before, whatever the victim group is to be, assigned to that subject, if you're not doing that constantly, then you're running this risk. And even if you are doing that, you're still just by being a professor and talking about lots of things, you're running this risk of some student, this fucking tweet, this motherfucker, racist, sexist, and it brings the hammer down of all of the. I mean, did you see Black Mirror? Did you see
Which one?
The one with the bees?
No.
Gamergate. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. Black Mirror just makes me so. I avoid things that make me very uncomfortable.
It makes me. It makes me sad too. Certain things about that.
Yeah, well, it's like I don't have the emotional bandwidth for that. Like there are other things I would like to, like. I don't know.
I'm chipper most of the time, so I don't mind watching something that's gonna seriously depress me. But Black Mirror.
I'm just saying, like, among other things, like if I'm doing something that's going to put me in this weird emotional state, if I spend 30 minutes watching it and then I have other things that I want to do, and I'm sort of thrown off by that. I don't know.
There was an episode that came up recently again because of another video that was about drones being used ubiquitously to kill and assassinate anyone gets hold of. They just drone swarms. They have little shape charges.
Is that Black Mirror?
So if you go down to that wasn't Black Mirror. That wasn't Black Mirror. But if you scroll down to the comments, everybody's talking about Black Mirror on that video, and it's because there's an episode of Black Mirror where the bees have all died, right? Because that was like in the news then, and it's still a problem everywhere. But the like whatever the neonicotinates or whatever that were, but anyway, the bees are gone, and so in order to have avoid massive famine everywhere and crops lost all over the world, they made synthetic bees. So there's these little synthetic drones that are everywhere. And then those get turned on against the population. There's some assassination. They do like a couple different assassinations of different people, and then you're probably not gonna watch the episode, so I'll just say spoiler alert to anyone watching. But they have the bees are killing a couple people, and then there's like a terrorist goes on the news and threatens, okay, everyone will vote by hashtag who dies next. So I know, and so there's all these people voting by hashtag. Oh, this person didn't live, and then the twist is that everyone who voted to kill someone they are hunted down and killed by the bees.
That's
Yeah, I know. That's so like all the people who were, online
It's
abuse.
not so
it was-
dystopic. It's not so dystopic after all.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So if genocide is on the table, but yeah. Well, I guess it wouldn't be genocide. You'd just be killing the douchebags. Is that genocide, or is that
it's
how
one of
you
the,
have
it's
a
one of the
civilization?
it's one of the good genocides. It's like affirmative
His words.
action.
I didn't say that.
It's the affirmative action of genocide.
Oh my. I can't. I don't know how to. Holy shit. It's the affirmative action of genocides. All right. So anyway, moving on. No. Why did I end up on the Black Mirror thing with the bees now? Fuck. Oh well, that was Gamergate related and stuff. But the ubiquity of drones and then like online abuse translating into real abuse. Like I know my roommate's ex-girlfriend ended up talking to the UN about how like online abuse.
Wait. Who was he dating?
Zoe Quinn.
Oh, so what? Lay this out for me, because I understand Gamergate generally, but not as it relates to Iran. And we probably should have had him lay it out for us.
Yeah, we should have, because I'm not gonna do it justice. I'm not.
Yeah, okay,
I'm not such a gamer. We'll do it next time. Next podcast we'll drag him into it. And then, it started much like the schism in the Catholic Church many centuries ago. It started with a he said she said thing, and it turned into a whole political movement, and now we have a Trump.
Has he ever done a podcast where he explains the entire thing in full depth?
Yes, it's incredibly boring. That's the thing, is that he is so honest and does not finesse, and it's just, this is what happened. It's like a Star Trek planet people.
So was he just talking by himself?
And then the reporter, like I've heard the recorded conversations and shit, and the reporter will just say, they'll come in with a narrative, and then they'll come out with weirdly the same narrative after saying, yeah, no, I agree, that's it, to him. It's very strange. It's almost like all reporters nowadays, like because the industry is collapsing, they're all fucking sociopaths or something, because they're saying a thing and then they're doing another thing, and it's, you said that thing.
I don't understand what you mean. So the narrative.
They're lying to him. They did this a bunch of times and then falsely reported like he encouraged a lot of people to do online abuse. He directly stated, please abuse this person. They'll say that. They'll say he did nothing of the sort. It was simply laying out facts. That was actually where it started.
Like what?
There were a lot of online people who maybe had shit they could relate to like this happen in their life, and it all potentially from that big cesspool of misogyny may have converged. Yeah, who's the chick who does the show Girls, who everyone hates? What's her name? I don't know it. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, Olivia Dunham. Olivia Dunham.
Lena Dunham.
Lena Dunham. That's the one.
I've never watched the show. I just heard that she just does things.
Oh, hey, you're still here. Yep, I'm back. Wait. Oh, you're coming back in.
Oh, hey.
All right. Hey, talk about gamer.
Gamergate.
Are you heading home tonight or? Oh.
Yeah, I missed the train, so
That's cool.
catch the next one.
No, but you can talk about Gamergate, and we'll actually.
I can't hear it.
Wait,
So
one
I'm just
second.
talking over Luigi right now. Okay, wait.
So
is this the
you
one that
can-
works?
So we want you to break down Gamergate, and we're actually going to make it interesting. Like
You're
having
gonna make it
convers-
interesting.
We are, by having conversations like real human beings.
All right. What's the format under which you'd like?
Well,
me
just
to
like
break it down?
when did it? Like how did it start?
So I dated this independent game developer / social justice activist in quotes, who was pretty big in the game community at the time. And one of the things that she'd sort of, her reputation had sort of skyrocketed on prior to my dating her was that she'd received some online harassment. So she was already primed in that respect.
What was she harassed about?
That's not clear. For making a game about depression, I guess.
Depression Quest
Yeah.
is what it was called, and it was text on a screen with the occasional image which you said was a good game actually.
Yeah,
but
I liked it. But, I mean, but it wasn't a fun game. But yeah, I mean, it was a game about depression.
I'm guessing a lot of people criticizing it haven't played it,
No, they
but
probably
they hear
have.
a description. Oh,
I mean, like,
okay.
if you play the game and you read their criticisms, yes, that would be the criticism you'd expect of someone who doesn't like the game, because it's basically a choose your own adventure novel in HTML. But whatever, I liked it as a thing. So anyway,
what were the critiques of the game? Like, why? I'm just trying to get.
Besides just being a choose your own adventure novel and the like, you know, the Goosebumps novels that were you could
Yeah,
go to
I know.
page
Yeah,
two,
yeah,
what
yeah,
is
yeah,
this?
yeah.
Is that a game?
yeah, that was basically
That's
Oh, so
yeah.
people who just like this game is shitty.
You have to
It was
understand,
like
like
a-
gamers.
Well, so
that
was that
game-
like okay? Part of the issue was that the game was kind of like
I study them.
was like lauded by a subset of people with certain political views, and then people with opposed political views to those political views were like, look at how they're lauding this shitty game. They're viewing this game as being good when it's barely even a game. That was their basic critique. Whatever.
Was it like us? Did she get harassed for being a woman, or like really like rape threats and things like that?
No, it was more of like there was, I think it was Wizard Chen, supposedly that there were negative posts about the game, and she sort of outlined them as being harassing her. Oh, also at some point someone got her phone numbers, and like it's very difficult to sort out what is and isn't true because a lot of the stuff is not true. So basically there were claims of harassment, and it's just that concept is there. It's not really clear how much of that concept is true.
Before
Gamergate started.
Yes.
Okay.
And
she had
was
gone
like,
to the press about it?
Sort of, yeah. There have been some things written about it. I mean, so the press around independent gaming is kind of like this incestuous clusterfuck of developers and journalists, or it was at the time at least. And so it's just kind of like one person, some journalist would virtue signal / signal boost in their on the platform that's been granted.
It's a market that's already saturated in bullshit, and so then they end up the only things that end up making it to the top were there because of something unrelated to the game being the playableness or the fun that someone who, if you imagine like a gamer as a thing, a separate entity, all the different things you could put in a video game, those are the things that they would want to do, the response from a computer and play those out and all those narratives, that those people's response, imagine what that response would be to in Depression Quest, the indie gaming community journalism was where we've gone to. But the journalism part is basically if you have the package of the thing, that's the video game, and you play the video game, and then you tell other people how enjoyable you found the video game, they're getting the exact same package that they then get to play. And so it's not as much of it. Like a lot of the gamers, especially in the indie gaming community, they'd be like, this fucktard doesn't know anything about video games. And they'll watch like a games journalist, for example. This was a big topic a lot in the subreddit for Gamergate. Games journalists will often be sort of caught playing a game and being a complete idiot within that game. And then why is this person a journalist about video games if they're unable to be a proper gamer and actually find?
Yeah, so I mean that's part of it. I mean that's not a huge. It's not like anyone gets legit mad about. That's one of those things that people get mad about for fun. But
the fact that the journalists weren't very authentic.
Yeah. So but that authenticity part. So there's more to it than that. It's kind of so basically this like very progressive faction that sort of kind of gotten a foothold in gaming and started like pushing their own agenda.
Yeah.
And a lot of gamers did not like the fact their games were getting increasingly politicized, and games that weren't good if they had the right political message were being pitched as good, and games were good if they if they maybe said something vaguely offensive, or if it wasn't anything offensive, but it could be interpreted as being like anti-feminist or something like.
Or even if it was offensive, but it was still awesome.
Yeah, or if it was offensive but awesome, right?
Yeah.
There was sort of this resentment over that entire cultural context, and they felt that there was like sort of some progressive encroachment on this previously apolitical space.
Right.
And
So it was based on like physics and processor cycles and I got the big NVIDIA graphics. That was like the things determining the space. You know, the medium is the message. It's not supposed to be the
politics.
Right, exactly. That aspect of the content shouldn't be the thing determining. Yeah. So anyway.
Right.
yeah. So anyway, so I played Depression Quest a few years prior to meeting the developer on OkCupid, and we ended up dating for like 7 months. And she was like super social justicey and just would always like take these strong principled stances against things.
This was in 2014, right?
2014. One of the things that she took a strong principled stance on was that infidelity is tantamount to violation of consent.
So rape.
Well, not rape. I mean, it's not like the two are necessary. Like,
Okay, right. Well, it's sex and violation of consent, but not rape. It's its own category. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyway, it's just, I mean, don't conflate it with rape.
Right.
That's kind of serious.
Well, that's what makes it
Yeah.
absurd sounding. Yeah.
So anyway, that was one of them. And there was a bunch of stuff. So, okay, there was a bunch of like strong principled stances that you take. And it turned out all of them were just like, she'd just been lying about all of it, and she'd constantly do things against the things that she'd claim. One of them was, cheat on me with like at least 5 dudes.
5 guys, burgers, and fries.
Yep. And I don't know, like for like 2 weeks, she like gaslit me like to the point where I was not sleeping for 2 weeks. I lost like 20 pounds.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So after I found out, and like she was being propped up by the community for these like views that she did not actually abide by. So I thought, okay, I don't know, maybe I should probably write about this. There was one other motivation for writing, which I still haven't determined whether or not I'm gonna say publicly, but whatever. So I ended up writing a blog post about my experience dating her. And 4chan found that blog post. Well, it was actually a forum post. 4chan found the forum post. The thread got deleted. The thread got deleted. And
Do I have a link to it?
To the
deleted thread?
The deleted thread? Or
Probably find our thread
just
somewhere.
Okay.
The
Well,
blog
we'll
post,
just
yeah.
We'll put a link at the
We'll
bottom,
put a
but
link at
it's
the bottom,
the Zoe post. It's
Yeah.
now.
we should actually start writing down the things that we said we put a link to the bottom to, because there's like 3 of them and I can't remember them now.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'll give it a listen through that.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I wrote that blog post. 4chan found. Well, I wrote a forum post. 4chan found the forum post. The thread got deleted, and then I was sort of like in the situation of like, okay, now anyone can just take like that screenshot, that one screenshot that they found, or if anyone screenshotted the thread, and then like they just could run wild with the story in whatever direction they want. So I wrote the blog post, and like as I was writing the blog post on WordPress, 4chan found the WordPress, and that blew up.
Rest is history.
The rest is history. I ended up making one joke in the blog post.
It's the headphones.
No, which turned out to be ill-advised because it became mimetic. So like I keep kicking myself. Like, maybe
5 guys burgers.
Maybe if I hadn't made that joke.
It's the 5 guys, burgers, and fries that I said.
So she slept with five dudes in 2 weeks or something, and then so you did that.
Well, I don't know if it was in 2 weeks. It was
It
just she cheated on me with 5
people,
dudes, and in the blog post I note that like every time I can't like stop thinking about every time I think about it, I can't stop thinking about like 5 guys, burgers, and fries, and that became a medic.
It's kind of funny.
So and then the thing that then turned this into an ethics and games journalism thing is you never said this, and you do not state this, you don't claim this, but people read into his WordPress and determined that there must have been some sex for good reviews going on with.
Oh.
Wait,
but how does that? What's that connection?
There's not
What's
good
that
evidence
connection?
to that, I don't think.
Yeah,
So
although there was almost
seems
certainly
like the kind of person it would.
there was likely good reviews for sex.
Wait, but how does that? Okay, so even if you didn't say this, how could they infer it?
How could they infer? Oh, because the person who, so I noted the names of one of, yeah, one of the people who she cheated on me with, and
I see.
4chan noted that person had written a positive review of Depression Quest.
Oh boy.
Oh, I see.
It wasn't really like a huge review. It was like a blurb.
No,
and
I
a
mean
list of
4chan
things.
found it.
Yeah.
That's the part that's oh
yeah,
boy.
4chan found it. Is the point. And I had said that they'd slept together in March, and the review came out in April. But like that was a typo. That from as far as I could tell, the earliest slept together was in May, and then I corrected it immediately when someone brought it to my attention.
Too late.
Yeah,
Internet never forgets.
Yeah, I mean, so the internet corrected itself with like, we no longer believe that was the case thing, but the other side was like, they still believe that's the case because they want to discredit the 4chan view. But basically, like, it was sort of just used as like, it was like this flag post, just this loud thing that was there, and now everyone could crowd around it, and so they crowded around it to use their own to like express their own political views, and fight each other around that turf.
It's kind of the dueling ideologies of the SJW, sort of modern SJWs, and the Gamergate thing. The overlap, there is some overlap, sort of in moralizing tendencies and stuff, but Gamergate very much falls on and it's a whole spectrum of different politics, right? You took surveys and stuff.
Yeah. It's mostly libertarian.
Right, ANCAP libertarian types. Very there's some idea that it's directly linked to the alt-right types, but it's kind of like, a lot of racists are Republicans, but not all Republicans are racist. It's squares and
So it's pitched as like this progressive versus conservative thing by progressives, but it's from like
classical liberal.
Like if you actually look at the stats, it's largely authoritarian versus libertarian.
Right. Yes. Which is kind of disturbing that SJWism has become the authoritarian. This is what Peterson talks about. They love Peterson, by the way, the Gamergate people. But the split is like in symbol space, can I do whatever I want? And the Gamergate idea of that would, with barring literally illegal actually illegal content, the Gamergate side would err on
yes.
Any content is allowed. Yes.
Right.
Whereas on the SJW side, it would be it seems to be, and again, there is a diversity of politics on that end, and they're going to fight amongst each other too, and they do. But it seems to be on the SJW side, the idea is if you take it out of the symbol space, if you take the bad stuff out of the symbol space, you can somehow shape people, or you can at least take the negative influences away that make people do all the things that somehow they've also done historically to each other awfully without all those memes involved. But that somehow are definitely our cultural misogyny and stuff like that is a direct result of our upbringing and our, we're born blank slates, and therefore I would argue both sides have aspects that are contradictory, but
they do,
and because there's some things that you
it's politics
generally would, and of course people are influenced by media. That's almost been proved now. But I mean, of course they're influenced by it, but I mean shaped by it to the point where they'll do crimes or not do crimes sometimes as a result of. So then can you blame the creator? What if they were, it's like the Matrix, what if it was just aesthetic and they weren't asking anyone to shoot up a place? And then you can't really know whether the Columbine kids would have just gone goth otherwise and not specifically picked out the Matrix aesthetic stuff. And so there's this sort of cascade of blame and stuff that happens that I think if you're just completely overcome or overwhelmed by that, erring on the or subscribing to the pure libertarian anarcho-capitalist, whatever I can sell, get away with selling, I kind of, or that would be the most extreme version of that. But that output in your games and your media is or that having that the widest possible range of what is allowed within games. I'm of the
view that
seems to be
don't tell creators what they can create. Tell consumers not to shoot people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we're mostly on that.
Yeah.
I wonder. Because some people think it's like a salve, playing a violent video game, and then some people think that it will make you do violent acts. And I wonder if it's just people differ, right?
Yeah.
I think it's clear that people differ. I mean, like,
I mean, we're all the same, but just don't be led astray.
yeah. So, what happened to you, I guess, after the whole thing started? Like, was there any?
Well, so like I
lost
got
your job.
Yeah, but I mean, it
You
was
lost your job?
sorry. I had like
Oh,
two
sorry.
jobs in the same place, and so like I was on contract, and then somebody like the internet started like harassing my employer, and
Wow.
yeah,
They do that.
yep, internet does that. But I mean, it wasn't too huge a deal. For one of them, I was planning to. I was on my way to leaving within like a month from that anyway. And since then, I've been working on my own.
Hey, now you can pitch Gifted Apprentice.
Yeah, to your audience of 5 people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
There's like 125 subscribers. Yeah.
So I've been working on an artificially intelligent animation program,
Mhm.
which I finished once, and now I'm rewriting because I wrote it in prototype code, in a prototyping language, and that's been cool and fun, and hopefully releasing that soon. And
What are some of the features of Gifted?
okay, so generally there are two ways to do animation. Two like main one, well, three. So there's traditional hand-drawn animation, which is nice because it's very quick to like create a character.
Mhm.
You just draw them and done. You have your designed character, but it's really tedious to animate them. You have to draw every frame by hand. Then there's 3D animation, where it's really easy to animate your character because you just pose a virtual armature, but it's really tedious to model and rig the armature to model the character that you want. So it's kind of
All the ways it could bend and stuff to make those realistic.
yeah, and also the actual physical model of what your character should look
Right,
like.
right, because it's 3D is more
Yeah.
of a there's depth.
Yeah. Beyond that, 3D isn't quite as expressive. You still have to follow like the rules of three-dimensional space, whereas you're not constrained to doing that in 2D. You can draw whatever you want because it's symbolic.
Like you see, like on Homer Simpson's head, he has like a MG as his hair, and it's Matt Groening, like that's his, or it's MG. Hair is the M, and then the G is the ear. But the way that rotates, and the way this whole body rotates, the whole animation in The Simpsons and stuff.
Yeah, it's not physically possible in 3D space, and that's why like if you see a 3D model of Homer Simpson, it always looks kind of weird.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been sort of an in between of that, which has its own huge drawbacks, which is okay, you have an armature that you can pose. It's in 2D space, and you can draw your 2D character over it, but it has this cardboard cutout mannequin look. Those like shitty flash animations.
Mhm.
It doesn't. You don't have the same sort of expressive quality, and your motions always look very rigid and weird. It's kind of like this, almost hieroglyphics. So what Gifted Apprentice does is Gifted Apprentice, the animation program. It will let you pose a 3D armature, and then and draw over it, and there's an AI that will figure out what you're drawing to and how that corresponds to the 3D armature, and
change it if you sort of set a keyframe in one spot and a keyframe in another, and then it will do all of the weird non-linear rotations that are it'll interpolate, but in a way that it's like if you had a rotation around Homer Simpson that was drawn by the animators in The Simpsons and was not a rotation around the weird 3D Homer Simpson. But it would, which they do sometimes. They have rotation in The Simpsons, and things don't move in quite the same. The distance from the camera view and stuff doesn't actually rotate, and it shouldn't. Like, we're comfortable with the way the Simpsons animation works and does expressiveness from the side of the face. You can still see enough emotion, and it's like a half symbol space thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry.
So basically what you do here is you tell the program, hey, this is how I want you to look from this view in 2D. So you just draw it. And then here's how I want you to look from this view in 2D, and you just draw it. And it'll figure out all the views in between, so you can rotate in 3D space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you can, and if it makes a mistake, you just correct it, and it learns from your correction. So basically you draw keyframes as you would in a normal 2D animation process, it figures out the in-between frames for you. And as you're drawing keyframes and making corrections, it learns so that you have to draw less and less. Eventually, you can just keep posing your armature.
Okay, cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. When are you putting that out?
Hopefully in a couple weeks.
Awesome.
Subscribe to the Patreon so you get a version, everyone. So,
yeah.
Right?
So
We'll add another link.
Well, like, how do you? So, like, is there like marketing around this, or are you just gonna?
Not yet. There will be, hopefully, if I can manage it. So one of it, I'm planning to send some copies out to like YouTube animators or something, just free copies and make whatever you want in it. And then hopefully if they make cool stuff, people will be like, hey, how'd you make that? And that might spread. Might also try to like send it out to like schools and stuff, see if they can make any use of it with teaching kids. And if all else fails in terms of monetization avenues, if I can't make it a viable like small business thing, then just open source it and get a real job.
Don't tell them you're gonna do that. Then they will buy it. They'll wait for it. All coordinate and do it. But I find it funny that it's a 2D versus 3D animation thing, just because I mentioned this before, but just because the 4chan alt-right kind of, or not alt-right, but 4chan, it's definitely part of the 4chan thing, and then hence, because alt-right kind of came from that, the idea of the 3D waifu, or the 2D waifu becoming real. Trump will make anime real.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to add a feature to like detect if you're using this to make furry porn and just lock you out.
But that neural net, after being trained, you do not want to run that in generative mode. No. Jesus Christ. Oh God. Within the weirdest timeline.
Yeah. That's cool, dude. That's really, so you've been working on it for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's cool. I met you 2 years ago, right? I think
Yeah, it was
it was 2 years. It was like 2015 when I came back
it must
to
have been
law
right
school.
when we were here. That would have been
Yeah.
Time flies. You got your you passed the bar, right?
I did.
Congrats.
Yeah, that was a pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 80-hour weeks for like 7 weeks in a row.
Yes.
Which, yeah, I mean, people do that, so it's just kind of a pain in the ass. That's all.
I mean, I've been doing 80-hour weeks for the past 2 years working on Genderfed, so.
Have you actually?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has the weirdest sleep cycle. Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, then I look like what am I complaining about, right?
What? No. It's also doing something fun.
Yeah, like I enjoy the thing that it's interesting problems. So.
Yeah, that's true. Not memorizing things that you will forget immediately afterwards.
At this point, the code base is 1.5 times the length of the Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings, and I mean in character count, and like stuff I've written, not like libraries, and also not counting comments.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's literally just 1.5 times the length of the Two Towers of just like pure programming logic.
And I know you haven't script kidded any of that, have you? All right. Wow.
That's awesome.
Well, then you have been doing lots of stuff for the past year. I just see the occasional output, and then he'll have to whiteboard some weird question. I'm his rubber ducky sometimes. You know, rubber duck programming or debugging. Rubber duck debugging is where you
basically just have like a rubber duck or little toy, or just like someone who doesn't know about the problem, and you explain it to them, and then like an absurd majority of the time you'll find the solution just as a result of having to explain it out to someone. That's the basic idea.
Yeah.
Do you guys see the comments?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, and then we'll just like take it offline.
Is there anything else we wanted to address?
No. I think this is a pretty good one.
Gamergate stuff. I think we did and then yeah. All right.